And to that piece of lieutenant that's always on his podcast, bash us, him.
All right, attention to roll call. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we got a special guest with us today. Lieutenant Commander, retired out of the NYPD. He's been on before. The author of Practical Homicide and the author of The Godfather of Homicide. My good friend, Vernon Geberth. Vernon, thank you for joining us this morning. Appreciate it, sir.
Thank you, John. I appreciate the opportunity. It's great to come back.
Yeah, no, we're excited to have you. So I know, we're going to get into New York State's first DNA case and actually the NYPD's first DNA case. But before we do, could you just lead us up to that point? Like, where are you in your career? What are you like starting to do? Like, are you getting ready to retire? Like, what, where are we in Vernon Geberth's journey in the NYPD?
Well, after that Larry Davis debacle, and after what I did to get him captured and in the heat of battle, referring to the chief of patrol as a complete fucking asshole, it was quite apparent I wasn't going to be around a long time. So I knew I had to plan my exit. And the problem with the exit is that being a lieutenant commander in charge of homicide in the Bronx, if I announced my intention to retire, there'd be about 25 people jumping into the slot. So I basically had to perpetrate the ultimate undercover act, how to retire without being caught. And it was kind of strange. It was kind of funny because I went to the senior administrative aide, Oscar, and told him, listen, Oscar, I got to put my papers in. He said, we can't afford to lose bosses like you. I says, listen, Oscar, I'm dead in the water and the torpedo's coming. I can feel it. And it was quite apparent. He goes, well, let me work behind the scenes. Okay, we'll see what we can do. In the meantime, I had a police officer homicide case, Michael Rei, January 23rd, 1987. I had just left the command. I was home, and I get a call from one of my detectives. Hey, boss, we have a cop killed. I said, I'll be right there. I hear my big mouth chief, Rotundo. Tell him to stay home. I'm taking care of this. I don't need him here. That's unheard of. You don't bring in the commanding officer of the homicide task force on a police homicide? Wow. Anyway, I was really pissed. But then the next morning, I had to get a call from the zone captain. Vernon, come on in. He fucked the whole thing up. Now I got to start all over again on Saturday. Interestingly enough, by Sunday, we had the perp in custody. They 5-2 PDU, the RIP squad. They came up with a robbery pattern, and we brought him in. And my first grade detective, Louis Hernandez, he got a confession. And now the protocol is, which I never liked, we have to wait for a district attorney to authorize the arrest. So it's the middle of a snowstorm. Who shows up with this 5'2" midget with galoshes and Coke bottle glasses with a Napoleon complex? Starts ordering people around. I'm saying, who the fuck is this? That's the district attorney. I want to speak to the prisoner and I don't want any cops in the room. I says, no, that's not going to work. I says, this guy's a homicide suspect. Louis Hernandez volunteers to go in. I don't want that detective. Take the handcuffs off. About 10 minutes later, we hear hysterical screaming like a woman. The prisoner jumped out the window. Now we have an escaped prisoner. So we bail out. Now, because it was a snowstorm, I could see tracks going towards Webster Avenue. I sent one team one way. I went the other way. Now, you can hardly see anything with the snowstorm, but I see a bus coming down Webster Avenue. I says, maybe he jumped on the bus. So I pull in front of the bus with my, the lights and jump on the bus with my gun. He's not there. 2 anti-crime cops from the 4-8 say, what's going on, boss? I says, we got the guy that killed the cop escaped. We have an escaped prisoner. There's nothing on the air. I said, I don't want it on the air. I says, we want to catch him. So I give him a description. Meanwhile, I go back to the command to start doing damage control. And all of a sudden, I find out 4-8 anti-crime have a perp, right? Almost went off the roof, the perp that we were looking for. Now, you and I both know if that guy fell off the roof, the media would have sworn we threw him off the roof. So basically, they rescued the perp, they brought him back, but now the damage is done. Escaped prisoner. So Rotundo comes in, chief from home, and his deputy, I call him Inspector McNasty, one nasty son of a bitch. And they start talking about giving charges to the detective. I see Louis' face. He goes, boss, I didn't lose the person. I says, calm down. Nobody's getting charges here. So I said to the inspector, I says, detective's not getting charges. I says, he didn't lose the prison. Maybe we should give charges to the commanding officer too. I said, oh yeah? I said, Chief, let me speak to you. I did the Hail Mary. I brought the chief in the other room. I said, listen, Chief, I've been around a long time. I says, I was on Operation Uncover. A lot of big bosses who discovered religion suddenly became integrity officers. I got their names, okay? They came up on the wire. They're just as corrupt as your inspector. The inspector had been arrested for perjury. He was on the pad in the 6th Division. The two cops testifying against him, the sergeant and a cop, right? They got their pension. The lawyer turned it around like they were only testifying because they got their pension, and he was acquitted. Now, you would think that if something like that happened, you think they'd come back with religion. He came back twice as nasty. Anyway, I stopped the detective from getting the charges, but now I'm really under the gun. You can tell when it's time. In the meantime, the chief, right? He knew I wrote a textbook. Every time there was a report, I did a report. Listen, Geberth, you wrote a textbook. You can do the report. He gives me the annual corruption report. That's the borough corruption report. It has to be prepared by the chief. So he gives it to me, and it takes me 3 or 4 days to get all the information. And he did just what he always did. I'd come in with the report. He'd look, okay, very good. Take your name off and have the secretary put my name on. So I came up with this neat little thing called the buzzword. It was invented by a bureaucrat in Washington, D.C. back in 1963. And what you do is you take one word from each column. Doesn't mean nothing. Systemized digital time phase. Compatible transitional mobility. And I loaded the report up with these buzzwords. He was so impressed with the report, right? So now it goes downtown. Well, it takes a while before it comes back. I'm almost out the door. And he called, what kind of bullshit did you put in the right report? I was trying to make you look good, Chief. It turns out that somebody higher than him had the same list that I had, that I got from the FBI Academy. So it's really funny. Anyway, it's February 1987. I have a lust murder. Terrible, terrible case. I'm about to launch my first DNA experiment. Now, I'm forensically oriented, and I had a good friend, Dr. Robert Shaler, who's a microbiologist. He had left the New York City medical examiner's office to go with a private firm. And he kept telling me about this new stuff called DNA. Well, the history of DNA is really fantastic. It comes out of England. Dr. Alec Jeffreys, he was a geneticist. And the story basically was that Scotland Yard realized they had a serial killer. They didn't realize it at first. In 1983, a little 15-year-old girl, Linda Mann, she was raped, strangled, her clothes were taken off. She was left in a path in the woods. The case was unsolved. But in 1986, another 15-year-old girl, Dawn Ashland, right? Similar circumstances, strangled, raped, and left in the woods. Scotland Yard immediately jumped on it. This is a serial murder case. The village idiot confessed, but only to one. He confessed to the 1986 case, but not the 1983 case. So they knew about the work of Dr. Alec Jeffreys. So they asked if Dr. Alec Jeffreys could look at the evidence. And he does. And he comes back with, I've got good news and bad news. The good news is I can molecularly and biologically link one donor offender to both of these victims. The bad news is the guy you have under arrest didn't do it. So the power of DNA, I mean, absolutely amazing.
And then, so that was the first known case in all of DNA history.
First in the world, and the first person to be exonerated by DNA. That's big because it doesn't only include, it excludes.
Yeah, because the guy confessed to something he didn't do, and so they exonerate him. Did they determine who actually did it? Did they get the perp for it?
Yeah, that's what they did. What they did is they had all males between 17 and 34 report to the town hall to give a blood sample.
Gotcha.
I could just see that in the United States, right?
Yeah,
There's
yeah,
an
yeah.
excellent
Definitely
book
not.
by Joseph Wunbach called The Blooding. It's a good book. Anyway, the guy who did it realizes he's going to get caught, so he pays somebody to give blood in his name. The guy he pays goes to a local pub and he starts drinking. Next thing you know, he raises his stein, and this is on Colin Pitchfork. The name of the guy was Colin Pitchfork. The barmaid hears this. She rings him up. Scotland Yard comes down, picks him up, takes a blood sample. He's the first person in the world to be convicted with DNA technology. 1986. Now, I know about this because my friend, the microbiologist, is telling me when I go to this crime scene and I see this crime scene, it is a bloodbath. I mean, there was no doubt when you look at this that the offender who did this had to cut himself. Vilma Ponce was 20 years of age and 8 months pregnant. Her little daughter, Natasha, was 2 years of age. You can see where the offender came in. There's no forced entry, okay? Offender comes in. The little girl tries to get away from the assault. He chases her into the bathroom and stabs her into the floor, all right? Comes back and works on Vilma. Her paternity top is up. She's nude from the waist down. She's 61 stab wounds, okay? Natasha, 12 stab wounds. The fetus, 3 penetrating stab wounds. In my mind, that's a triple homicide. But the heathen that ran the district attorney's office in the Bronx didn't see it like that. Anyway, there's this, if you look at the crime scene, you can see droplets of blood on top of the Adidas sneaker prints. And out the door is one single drop of blood. To me, that means the offender has cut himself. So Andy Lugo was my top detective. God bless him. He's no longer with us. Andy Lugo and Eddie Blake from the 5-2 PDU have this case. I tell them, listen, do not take that evidence to the lab and forget about the FBI. You're going to take it to this place called Life Coats. We can do a DNA analysis.
So, time out. So, like, we don't have any procedure on this, obviously, right? Criminal procedure at that time, or investigative procedure at that time is the evidence goes to the lab, right? So you take it upon yourself to just say, we're gonna go. I heard about this thing in England. I want to try it out.
Yeah, fully realize I'm not going to be around much longer. Okay, what happens is our perp is the husband. We think. Why? Because he's a drug addict, former abuser, beat his wife, broke her jaw 1 year early. But his story is so stupid, John. His story is that he came home and the lock was on the door, the chain lock, and he looked in and he thought he saw water on the floor and thought maybe his wife's water broken. So he ran downstairs to the bodega to call his mother to tell her to call the police. In the interim, he sees a guy leaving the building with blood on his clothing, his sneakers, and his left wrist. He goes back up to the apartment and the door is no longer secure, but when he sees blood, he doesn't go in. That's his story. Okay? That story sucks, considering there's no forced entry, right? He's brought in as a witness, of course, not a drop of blood on him. As we go through the crime scene process, we notice that there's a bag of groceries dumped on the couch with a receipt indicating a purchase was made at 3:45 from the bodega downstairs. And a clock is pulled from the wall at 4:30. So we're saying the time of this event is probably between 3:45 and 4:30. Where's our suspect? He's at work. He's got an alibi. Okay, so we just eliminated our primary suspect. And that a lot of people don't realize about homicide is a lot of our work is elimination of people as well as, including. The suspect that he described during the canvass, people realized that they saw the same thing. He exited that alley. He went to the courtyard of 3424 across the street and then went into an alleyway. Later on, we'll find out he had an apartment there. He's an assistant to the assistant superintendent.
How'd you guys identify him? Like, how did that happen?
Well, we go back the next day looking for this guy described by the people in the canvas, and we see him mopping the floor of 3415. And he identifies himself as an assistant to the assistant superintendent. So Eddie Blake notices he's got a cut on his hand. All right? So we asked him to come into the station house. Now, Eddie Blake is a very thorough detective. He grabs the mop buckets and he vouches them. Why? Because he vouches everything. He's a great detective. At
Took
the
overtime.
precinct, at the precinct, we're talking to this guy, and Andy Lugo says, because he remembered about the leper, says, let me see your watch. He takes his watch off. It's still caked with blood. The pig never took a bath or a shower. So realizing they got dried blood on this watch, well, we need to have your watch. Do you have any sneakers? I don't own sneakers. Now, if this guy doesn't own sneakers, then I'm not a lieutenant commander. I think he popped out of his mama wearing sneakers. Anyway, he gives the cops permission to go to his house to look to see if he has sneakers and clothes. And they go there and he has no sneakers. We give him a watch. We have a drawer full of watches. We give him a watch, and we're going to send this watch off for DNA analysis. In the meantime, we recovered green fibers and other evidence in the crime scene. So we take his picture. All right. We do a record check. 1 year earlier, he was arrested for rape in another building he was assigned to clean. And the photograph from the arrest record shows him with a fro. He doesn't have a fro. He went to his mother's house and had his head shaved after the homicide. So we get the razor, we get the green fibers, and now we're waiting. Of course, we don't have enough probable cause to arrest him, so we bring him back to the neighborhood, and he waves to everybody. He thinks he's beat us. We have to wait for the DNA analysis. It takes about a month. Okay, it's a process that's called RFLP technology. It was the Model T of DNA technology. It comes back in March. All right, positively identified. The blood of the victims is on the wrist, on his watch. Okay, and the blood from the crime scene is intermixed with the Natasha, Vilma, and Joseph Castro, our suspect.
So
ironically,
so good old-fashioned police work identifies them, right? Like you guys, like you through eyewitness ID, and then you guys go back out, you do a canvas for him, you find them, you're like, this is the guy. You have the blood from the crime scene, the one drop on the way out by the door. You have blood on his watch, right? You have dried blood on his watch. How does that work? Like, how was that procedure? Like, it wasn't in place. So, like, what happened when you guys called that lab and were like, yeah, we want you. This is the NYPD. We want you to, like, did you have to promise them anything? Were they just excited about it? Like what happened there?
It's mixed emotions. First of all, by what authority did you do that? I said, by the authority vested in me as a squad commander. I says, I know about evidence, and your evidence, your procedures are not going to work. I've been studying this, all right? I conferred with the microbiologist who told me he can do this process. That's why we're doing it. And you're right. Good old-fashioned police work identified him and the canvas, etc. But now we needed the technology because the blood types, if you remember at the time, blood types were not very good. The ABO system gave you 1 in 3. In the early 1980s, they came up with PGM subtypes, which gave you 1 in 10. So 1 in 10 is better than 1 in 3. With DNA, it's 1 in 80 million. That's like comparing somebody on a tricycle to somebody in a rocket ship. It's fantastic. But here's the kicker. When it came back, it also matched a prior homicide at another building he was assigned to clean that took place 1 year earlier. So we had a serial killer and we didn't even know it. That's the power of DNA.
So like, and then how the lab have that, his DNA, like to be able to identify him?
Well, we have blood samples.
No, I know. I'm saying like, so like how that second homicide happened, because it wasn't like now where we have a database you're running against it. You know, like now they would put your blood in and they'd run it against it, right? And you'd pop. Like this predates all that.
Well, we had to submit the evidence from the other homicide.
Gotcha.
Okay, that's how they made the comparison. But here's it gets worse. It gets worse. The Bronx District Attorney's Office is so bent out of shape because now they have to learn about DNA. The 2 defense attorneys, Scheck and Neufeld, all right, they have been using DNA to get people released. They're going to litigate DNA. The governor at the time is Como. Como is a defense-oriented governor. He puts these 2 snakes in charge of a commission to find out whether or not the state of New York should use DNA. That's like putting a fox in a hen house. So this became a very controversial case. Now, this is really funny because I authorized $5,000 worth of testing, fully realizing when I left, the bill would come in, I wouldn't be there. Okay. Homicide cops don't get mad. We get even. All right. But the two litigants, okay, Schett and Neufeld, attacked the science. As a result, it was a 50-50 win and loss. The DNA was allowed to include, okay, the suspect, exclude, but not include, okay? It doesn't matter. Joseph Castro was convicted. But this began the assault on DNA by the defense establishment, because DNA took the gamemanship out of the trial. You either did it or you didn't do it. Don't forget, it was used to eliminate the kid in Lancashire, right, England, because that's how powerful it is. So what happens is now that the case will be resolved. Now I'm retired, okay, but before I retire, I got to make my exit. I had to slip out. So how do I get out? I got out by using my tax registry number. Everything was processed through headquarters, my tax without my name. That Friday, I had a full schedule. So it looked like I'm going to be around a long time so that the chief and the guy downtown can get me. Looks like I'm going to be there. Have a whole, right, NSU teaching this. I'm teaching the homicide school on Friday, which means I won't be in the office. On Monday, everything's set for me to go. The senior administrator tells me, listen, Vernon, everything's ready. All you have to do is you have to go downtown and you make your exit. That Sunday night, I couldn't sleep. Why? Because I loved what I did. I loved my job. 23 years, right? I have a grandfather clock. Every freaking hour. 1, 2, 3, 4. I got up at 5 o'clock because this is ridiculous. I can't sleep. I showered, put my suit on, went to the command and picked up a police parking plate, okay? Went down to headquarters. I get there at 7 o'clock in the morning. Doesn't open till 8, okay? So I'll get a cup of coffee. I can use a cup of coffee. 8 o'clock, I walk in. Now, you know the way the building's structured, 14 floors? I used to refer to as a Tower of Babel. all the confusing orders that come out of one police plaza. All the civilians are on the ground floor. So I'm on the ground floor. I go from lieutenant commander to civilian in 45 minutes. They get my IT card, they stamp it, turn in my shield. I have one. They want the guns. No, I got a permit. Give me right. I walk out of there. I notice for the first time in my 23-year career, I'm illegally parked. But I had a police plate, so I'm covered. Now it's my job to go back and inform the commanding officer that I'm retired. I waived everything, so they couldn't touch me. So I go back, I knock on the door. Chief, very busy right now. Geberth, come back after I have my coffee and take a shit. I said, I'm going to shit in a minute. I go back to my command. I tell everybody, listen, I'm officially retired. Next thing you know, the phone calls start calling in. I'm getting calls from the field. What are you doing? I said, I had to leave. I had to go. I get buzzed by a secretary about half an hour later. What are you doing here? You're supposed to be working evenings. No, I just came to say goodbye. You just had a vacation. I said, no, I'm retired forthwith. These are my papers. He blew up like a blowfish. I think he saw his career flash by. Because in the scheme of things, he's supposed to get me for the guy I called an asshole downtown, right? I walk out the door. I would have liked to have said something dramatic like, adios, motherfucker. But after 23 years of yes, sir, no, sir, I couldn't do it. The sad part of the story is when I went back, 4 of my homicide guys put their papers in behind me. I said, what are you doing? You're the last real homicide boss. We're done. We have 30 years on. That's the sad part of the story. The good part of the story is I launched a brand new career, practical homicide investigation. I was already going around the country. Who hires me but the DNA firm that I just used to be a consultant and to teach DNA to other law enforcement agencies across the country. So that was the beginning of my new career.
So just to take you back on that, like what was that like? Like you basically rob evidence like from the crime scene, give it to this thing that the department's not aware of, this laboratory, right? And like, what was that? Did you receive any pushback on that? Like during the case, like was anybody coming down on you about trying to bring this technology in, or were people like, hey, let's try it out? Like how did the department react?
I'm sure after the fact they tried. What I did is I documented everything. I'm good at documentation. I documented that I believed that the lab and the FBI lab could not do this particular process. Part of the evidence did go to the lab, all right, the evidence from the inside the scene. But the watch and the other stuff, that went up to life codes. And I documented why we did it and how we did it. And so that I was okay. I'm sure later on people were pissed off, especially when the bill came in. But I wasn't there for the bill. All right. Justice prevailed.
What was it? What was the bill at that time?
$5,000.
And that was 89, you said?
Oh, I don't know what it is now.
No, I'm saying 1989. That was the year, right?
Oh, this was 1987.
87. So that's a lot of money back then. And the city wasn't doing well. So,
well, the process was a very expensive process. I mean, it was very involved. And then, plus being involved in a DNA firm, I was also given the authority to open up cases so they could increase their database.
Gotcha.
So I was like a kid in a candy shop. What kind of case you got here? So I was opening cases and I was learning. I had the first serial murder case with DNA down in Virginia. Okay, and that was another thing, because every time I did a case and I learned something, I brought it into the field as part of instruction. Like the case in Virginia, Timothy Wilson Spencer, 2 homicides back to back in Richmond, Virginia, and 1 in Arlington. Ironically, they were not connected. The FBI profile was talking about an unknown white male who resides in the neighborhood. Well, all the FBI profiles are the same. The unknown white male who resides in the neighborhood. This DNA is coming back to a black man. And it turns out that the case in Arlington is related to the one in Richmond, Virginia. So that became another source of my investigation. I started comparing how many black serial killers we have, because nobody was keeping any track of it. They were always white. I said, no, there's quite a few black. So I published a paper on black serial murder. In the meantime, in 1988, I'm in Wichita, Kansas, and I'm teaching in Wichita, Kansas. Now, in 1974, the BTK killer was active in Wichita, Kansas, and he devastating murders, the way he would tie these people up and abuse them, sexually abuse them. Well, the Otero homicide, which took place in 1974, involved the father, the mother, the brother, and little Josephine. He took little Josephine down to the basement and hung her, and as she's dying, he's masturbating on her. There was quite a bit of evidence in that case. Now, because I had this reputation for DNA, the detective who had the case, Ken Landwehr, who ultimately became the commander, his boss, John Dotson, was a lieutenant, said, Vernon, can you help us out with this DNA on this possible case? Because he's an unidentified serial killer. I said, yeah, I think we can do that. I brought the evidence back to Life Coach Corporation, came up with a DNA print. In 1988, we could positively identify the unknown BTK killer by his DNA, but he hadn't been identified yet. Gotcha. But what happened in 1988, a woman and her daughter were strangled and raped. And he got so excited with the story, he wrote to the newspapers claiming he was back. That's what precipitated this investigation with the DNA. But it wasn't him. It was somebody else, and the arrest was made. So back then, nobody knew this. And of course, I wasn't telling anybody. So when he reemerged in 2004, announced that I'm BTK and I'm back, he was unaware that we had actual physical evidence. But it was very interesting. I got involved in that case peripherally. What happened is he was communicating with the authorities, and those communications that they gave, they would run them by me for like, what would your response be? To try to trigger him and get him to do things. And the beauty of that is he thought he was so smart. The malignant narcissism is the clinical term for this behavior. He loved the fact that he had these cops chasing their tail. He wrote the first communication in 2004. He took credit for a homicide that took place in 1986. Now, that case in 1986 was never solved, and it was believed that the husband did it because they were going through some sort of marital discord, and he was outside waiting for her to pick up the child, and if she didn't come out, he was going to yell. When she doesn't come out, he goes in, he finds her tied up, he unties and calls the police and the ambulance. Well, he was a suspect without any evidence. But now the BTK sends a copy of her driver's license, okay, and photographs, third, fourth resolution Polaroid photographs of the victim tied up in the scene. It's outrageous. Now, Ken Landwehr became the homicide lieutenant in charge of that case, but the KBI, Kansas Bureau of Investigation, under Larry Welch, Larry Thomas was his chief investigator. Those two guys put together the BTK task force. And I was an integral part of that because I was in communication with them. When he was finally identified as a possible suspect, and this was really fantastic, this was based on video surveillance at a Home Depot, because he was leaving packages around the city of Wichita with clues, to kind of taunt the police. And what he would do is he would purposely leave these things out on a holiday, like July 4th or Labor Day, just to fuck with the cops, all right, just to take away their time off. So what happens is they have a video surveillance of his black truck at a Home Depot where he's placing a package in the back of another truck. That turned out to be another BTK. We call them BTK grams, okay? When they see that truck, they have an identification of this person, but they have no evidence. In one of the ballsiest moves of law enforcement that I've ever seen, Larry Welch, the director of KBI, orders his agents to seize a pap smear of the daughter of this suspect from the college that she went to. They take the pap smear and compare it with the evidence that they have, and they cannot eliminate that man as the BTK killer, Dennis Rader. That's some piece of work. Let me tell you something.
That would never fly today, right? That would never fly today, right? They would go nuts about that, right? Like civil.
Oh my God, the libertarians would go crazy. But this is the Midwest, and they don't worry about the East and the West Coast.
Yeah.
They do business, and they took it to the lab at Toledo, Topeka, Kansas, overnight, and came up with the evidence. Now here's the kicker. The game plan was, and this was a really good strategy. As a homicide commander, I love this strategy. Each body had a separate team of detectives assigned, which meant that they were thoroughly conversant with every piece of evidence, every, we call them DD5, every police report, everything and the background of victimology. The game plan was to take him in the street at his lunch hour, because in one of the communications he talked about he has a lair, L-A-I-R, with a bomb. And if anybody comes near him, he'll blow everybody up. So they take him down in the street, completely psychologically disorient him, which was the game plan. Mm-hmm. I'm big on psychological stuff.
And when he's least expecting it, right? When he's the most comfortable, and boom, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, and completely disoriented. Now, the game plan was to take him to the federal building. So because the news media was monitoring the police, so they wouldn't know there was an arrest, take him to the federal building and question him throughout the weekend with each team. Great strategy, and then arraign him on Monday morning. Okay. The only problem with that strategy is the FBI. They can't help themselves. Some muckety-muck in the FBI decides to make an announcement. The Bureau has the BTK suspect in custody. You fucking assholes. You just screwed up the whole fucking operation. I got a call at home that afternoon from Larry Welch, the director. Vernon, we got him, but we're under a gag order. We can't talk. You're going to have to talk for us. I'm sure you're going to get a call because it's coming out that he was arrested. So he tells me what happened. I said, okay, good. I got it. Sure enough, my phone starts ringing off the hook. CNN, Fox News, screw CNN. I'm going to Fox News, right? I go to Fox News that night. And who's the host but Greta Van Susteren, the one who looks like she got hit by a truck a couple of times. Anyway, she's not a very nice person. I tell the producer, I says, get Greta on the phone. I have to speak to her. Commander, she's very busy. I says, I don't care how busy she is. I'm about to give her an exclusive, but she's got to talk to me. So she gets on the phone. What's so important, Commander? I said, what's so important? I'm about to make you famous, but you'll have to ask me this question. I can't volunteer the information. So I give her the question. And now the fun begins. The first panel, this FBI, black FBI agent from Houston, blah, 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 the FBI, blah, blah, blah. Then they switched to me. The FBI had nothing to do with this. And I laid the whole thing out about Wichita and the KBI, right? Oh, The next day, forget about it. I couldn't. Everybody was calling me and their brother because they wanted to get the insiders. I can't give you anything more. I'm just giving you the facts of the case. That was my contribution to the BTK case. But let me tell you how this stuff works. You know, when I did my future editions, I have the sex-related homicide textbook. I have the entire BT case from start to finish in my sex-related homicide book. Why? Because they gave me everything from Wichita and KBI. Now, right after this case broke, all of a sudden, all the geniuses who knew everything came out of the woodwork. The FBI wrote a book. Somebody else wrote a book. Everybody's writing a book how they knew it was him, Dennis Reagan. Mine is a textbook. Before I did the textbook, I gave the manuscript to KBI and to Wichita. I said, make sure this is correct. They gave me the okay. It's 100%, Vernon. I said, thank you. That's published. But that's the kind of work I do, and that's where I get the information. So it's a nice feeling.
No, yeah, that's wild. Just to back up on you real quick, when you guys did when you basically brought it to the NYPD DNA, how many cases were there prior to that in the world? Was that, or like in America?
Thank you for that question. You know why? That was the third case in the world, the second one in the United States, the first one in New York State. The second one was in Orange County, Florida. Tommy Lee Andrews, a serial rapist. The third case was in the Bronx with me. So, and then it began to unfold. Now, don't forget that criminal justice had to accept the science. So they got to go through FRI hearings and this and that and appellate division rulings. And that's great because with each year it got better and the DNA increased. Like today, we have touch DNA and things you couldn't do back then. All right. So it's a wonderful thing because it takes the gamemanship out of the trial. You either did it or you didn't do it. And that's why you take a look at this Kohlberger case out there in Idaho. They're dying to get that evidence out. Everything they can do to get that evidence away because that's going to convict them.
Yeah. So, I mean, you were basically a forerunner in it, right? I guess it was considered theory at the time you did it because it wasn't actually admissible until they went through all those hearings. So you basically went on the theory of what you heard, right? You went, and then
it had been established in England, okay,
but
and
not here. Not
here. No, it had to be litigated. So what the two Weisenheimers from the Bronx defense office did, they attacked population genetics, okay, database information. They attacked statistics. But they couldn't attack the science because the science is science. And that's what's so important because that's what I love forensics. Science, you can't argue. You can argue it in court. But they had all of those hearings and then they could only go so far. Now science took over.
Yeah, that's wild. That's a wild story, man. That's so you hear about this thing, you hear about it, you learn about it, and then you're like, you know what, this will work here. We have the elements we need in this case to test it out. So
I was always looking for new stuff, John. Looking for new stuff. I mean, that's what it's all about. And plus, as I'm teaching across the country, I'm also learning because there's a lot of knowledge out there. And once you get past the fact you're from New York, like I remember I went to Chicago. I was the only New York cop ever allowed to teach in Chicago, right? The second city. And they loaded the class up with some real heavy duty, old time homicide cops from Chicago and a bunch of new ones, right? And so as soon as I got in front of the class, the old timers started busting my balls. I says, okay, you want to bust my balls? All right, I'm going to start asking you questions. By the third question, okay, you win, you're the expert. I says, I tried to tell you, this is not how we do it in New York. This is how we do it in practical homicide investigation. I am not selling the New York product. I don't like the New York product. And it was true. And I would pick up things. I'd learn things. And eventually, by operating the way I did, I had cases from all over the country. I could target my audience to the South, to the West, to the Midwest, to the Northeast, because they could relate to those cases.
And just for the audience, how beneficial do you think the DNA has been to murder investigations or criminal investigations as a whole?
Well, it's changed the whole game plan. The only downside of it is that, for years we didn't have DNA and we convicted people. Now, if you don't have DNA, they don't think you have a case. So it's a double-edged sword. It's good in one way, but it's bad in the other way. What about circumstantial evidence? Circumstantial evidence is excellent.
That's same with video, though. Same with video too. If you don't have video, it didn't happen. It's like, well, it's not a video camera everywhere in the world. Like, it's like
you're right. They're spoiled. They're spoiled. We want everything.
It's lazy prosecution. It's lazy criminal justice. Lazy prosecution.
Yeah.
So like that's the double-edged sword. They want DNA. If you don't have DNA, I could see that. But and it also is. I mean, basically on civil liberties as well. It's a challenge to get DNA sometimes as well. Like
Well, let's talk about O.J. Simpson, because that was interesting. I got involved in the O.J. Simpson case early on. What happened is I happened to have been teaching in Chicago at Northwestern University the week of that event, from June 12th to June 17th, including the slow speed chase on I-405 in California. Well, what happens is I had 3 Chicago homicide cops in my class. Okay, so they're filling me in with what they learned from the LAPD. Now, the LAPD told Chicago to pick up OJ if he didn't volunteer to come back to lock him up. That's called probable cause. You can't tell another agency to hold somebody for you. So then I started looking at the case, and I says, holy shit, this is a domestic violence case. Now, I'm an expert on domestic violence. Okay, I have a lot of domestic violence cases. So there's no mystery here. It turns out that there literally was a trail of blood from the double homicide at 875 Bundy Drive to O.J. Simpson's house at Rockingham. Okay? Blood mixed at both scenes. Now, how this went down, there was a history of domestic violence with O.J. Simpson and Nicole Brown Simpson. Now, she had made formal complaints in 1982, 85, 93. The cops had responded to Rockingham 18 times on domestic violence cases. And each time it was OJ talking to the cops, okay, don't do that again. It was a good old boy bullshit. Anyway, they were separated. They had agreed that they would be allowed to date other people during this separation. Well, that sounds good, except that OJ was very jealous of Nicole. And when Nicole dated his best friend, Marcus Allen, he went batshit. I'll kill you if you date him again. Meanwhile, he's parading around with every girl in town that he can find. All right. That evening of the homicide, there was a recital for his daughter. Now, Nicole Brown wouldn't sit next to him. She was mad at him. He was sitting a few chairs away. After the recital, the family went to this place called the Menzalusa restaurant. And he was not invited. He's pissed. Anyway, as luck would have it, they come back from the restaurant, and Nicole realizes her mother left her prescription glasses at the restaurant. So she calls up the restaurant. My mother left her glasses. Could you please hold them? Ron Goldman, who worked at the restaurant, says, oh, I know them. I'll take them home after work. So he volunteers to take the glasses home. Well, the rest is history. Poor Ron Goldman walks into this thing, and the slaughter has taken place. Nicole Brown, since she's cut the carotid, the jugular, all right? Ron Goldman tries to put up a fight. He gets cut in the jugular, the abdomen. But because he was fighting with O.J. Simpson cut himself. And now there's blood at the scene. And he drops a glove. Now he's got to get home because he's supposed to be in Chicago the next day. He's racing home. He almost hits somebody who takes his plate number down. He gets back to Rockingham and the limo's outside waiting for him. He can't let the limo driver see him. So he comes into a side path, jumps over a fence to get into his property, breaks the fence, and drops the right-hand glove at his estate. Goes into his house, has to change. Blood all over the place, blood in the foyer, blood in the bedroom, blood in the shower, blood on the socks. Now, the cops who got called to the homicide, the uniform, they can notify detectives. Detectives go, we got to talk to OJ. This is OJ. They go to his house under the pretense that they're going to make a notification. No one answers. So, under emergency circumstances, you're allowed to jump a fence to go into property to make a notification to see if somebody's okay. Maybe he's dead. Because in a lot of suicides and homicides, there's a suicide. They get in the property and they see the blood. Stop. They get a search warrant. Where's OJ? Well, OJ's already on the way to Chicago. He jumped into the limo. He got there. I think the flight was leaving 11:45. He got there at 11:30 or something. You didn't have to take your shoes off in those days. He leaped over the barriers, like from the commercials. Anyway, he's in Chicago. They're looking for him. They notified Chicago police. Now, I'm aware of all this because I talked to the Chicago cops. I'm aware of the evidence. I'm aware of the trail of the blood. And what happens next? They tell OJ they want him to come back. He volunteers to come back. Now, this is Friday night in O'Hare Airport, trying to get back to Newark, to New York, right? You never get on time. There's always delays, right? I'm sitting in the airport lounge waiting for my plane. I get a call from this producer from something called the Maury Povich Show. I said, who the hell's Maury Povich? Right? Oh, we're doing a special. O.J. Simpson was arrested. Is going to be arrested for homicide, and we want to have an understanding of how homicide investigations work. I say, okay, I know a little bit about it. I'll come on. I'm on the panel Monday. I'm on that panel, 9 people. Every one of those people were for O.J. Simpson. I'm the bad guy. So,
but you're not against O.J. Simpson. You're just stating facts.
Stating facts, yeah. They're saying that he shouldn't be arrested. I'm saying, no, listen, let me tell you something. I says, let me lay it out for you. You got blood at one scene. You got blood at the other. You got a bloody glove here. You got a bloody glove there. You got the Bronco. I says, this evidence overwhelmingly inculpates O.J. Simpson, whether you like it or not. So now the attorney there, I have just come to the conclusion that O.J. needs all the legal help he can get. He's trying to get himself hired, this silly son of a bitch, right? And I get so pissed off, I storm off, because I'm talking about domestic violence. I storm off the show. So the producer's running behind me. Commander, come back. I says, no, I'm not coming back until you do a show on victims, okay, and domestic violence. Then I'll be back. So OJ is supposedly at this hotel when he gets the notification. He is so upset that he smashes a glass and cuts his hand. So he's trying to cover up the cut on his hand. So let me tell you something. Glass cuts are not the same as knife cuts, okay? He comes back. Now, there's a lot of dynamics in the investigation back in LAPD. Mark Furman and his partner thought they had the case, and it was going to be a big case for them. But LA Homicide comes in with Tom Lang and Vanetta. As far as I was concerned, if I was the supervisor, I wouldn't let Vanetta near anything. He was nothing but a lazy, recalcitrant detective. The only thing on his mind was he bought property and he was going to retire. Useless. They bring back OJ. A cop slaps a pair of cuffs on him. Everybody gets mad at the cop. I says, he's the only person thinking like the cop. It's probable cause. Put the cuffs on him. Bring him in. Shapiro, who's really an entertainment attorney, allowed his client to be interviewed by the 2 LAPD detectives, Vanetta and Lang. What a disgrace. A 32-minute interview. They talked over each other. It was almost like they were afraid to confront him. He's lying his teeth off. They tell him we got blood. He goes, are you telling me there's blood all over the place? Yeah, OJ, and it's yours. He never would have got out of a New York City squad room. I'm telling you right now, he would have got a confession. He was psychologically oriented to confess to that. No. Okay, stop the interview, take a picture of his hand, get a blood sample. Then he puts the blood sample in his pocket, Vanetta, and walks around to the different crime scenes. Son of a bitch, he's setting himself up to look like the scene was clay. Meanwhile, the media gets in. The media declares it the trial of the century. This is a trial of the century. This is a domestic violence homicide. The defense tried to hire me. I turned them down. I says, your client's guilty. You're not very professional. I says, no, I'm the real deal. Your client's guilty. They're using my book against the LAPD. So I send a free copy to the district attorney's office. Says, you better give it the program. They're using my book because there were errors in the crime scene process. Now, they announce who's going to be the defense team. The dream team. Johnny Cochran, a racist. Okay. F. Lee Bailey, a faker. Okay. Alan Dershowitz, all right. Ullman. Big names. Sheck, Neufeld for the DNA. Kardashian. So the news media is enamored by these characters. I said, this is not good. Prosecution had everything. They had witnesses. They had DNA. They had science. They had motive. They had opportunity. Defense had nothing. So what do? They put on a show. Illusion, okay? Delusion and illusion. And they litigated everything. Early on, I remember I was on one of the local Fox affiliate in New York talking about the crime scene at Rockingham and why the police had a right to be there. They're litigating everything. They bring in Dr. Henry Lee, a forensic scientist, to attack the forensic evidence. Well, he can't attack DNA because DNA he writes about. So what he goes for is cross-contamination and evidence procedures. And so once a week, I was on something called Inside Edition, and they would interview me and I'd refute what was going on in the courtroom. And Henry Lee made a big deal about there was cross-contamination of the evidence, the way they package it. I said, well, you can't contaminate a molecule. It's impossible. It's a molecule. That's what DNA is all about. So we kind of neutralize that. But Henry Lee is very clever. He has a high Chinese accent, and he really engages people. He goes, you find cockroach in pot of sauce. You don't look for a second cockroach. You throw that whole pot. They want the evidence thrown out because the evidence is overwhelming. Well, they're in good shape. But Johnny Cochran's playing the race game. Here's the problem. Gil Garcetti, who was the chief district attorney, moved that case from Brentwood, California, to downtown LA to keep it available for press conferences. Downtown LA is a bad jury pool. They just had the Rodney King episode. The blacks are in an uproar. Those people in that jury are from downtown LA. You can see where this is going. They were all predisposed. So it starts. Bloody glove. They find out that OJ is going to be asked to put the glove on in the courtroom. So he doesn't take his arthritis medication. What happens, though, we back here in the East know, I know as a kid I got my ass kicked a lot of times for ruining a good pair of leather gloves making snowballs. That glove was saturated with blood. It shriveled. When he tried to put the glove on with that big act in the courtroom, and Johnny Cochran, if it doesn't fit, you must have quit. Okay? You see what he's doing. He's got the jury in a cadence. That's not good. Their best witness, of course, was Furman, because Mark Furman found the gloves. But Mark Furman is about to be disemboweled because Mark Furman was getting all this publicity for being the court stud and this and that. And somebody releases to the defense that he's on tape talking about blacks, calling them the N-word and flaking people. That's it. Prosecution's going down the tubes. The defense just got manna from heaven. The Furman tapes. And on the tapes, he's saying these things. He ended up getting charged with perjury, Furman. He lost everything. And what started out was called...
You remember what the perjury was for that he got charged with?
I'm sorry?
Was it perjury in regards to the OJ case or in regards to prior cases?
No, to the OJ case, because he swore he never said that word. He never used the N-word.
Oh, gotcha.
Right? Now you have the tape. And this, I mean, this. First of all, I'll talk later about Judge Ito. He's a jerk, but this fell right into the hands of the defense. So this now became a racial incident. This was no longer a trial. This was a race war, white against black, and that's what's happened because I could see in the people you talk to, they were taking up positions based on white and black, and this is not about white and black. This is about domestic violence. You got to get past that. So. Here I am. I'm making all these statements on television back and forth. I'm vested in this outcome. When the jury came down and they acquitted him, I felt like I lost because I was so vested in the outcome in what was right. And I was quoted. I said, "Justice did not prevail." But the real outrage. Look, the real outrage was a jury finding him not guilty. All right. A judge who was an incompetent, silly son of a bitch, who basically he lost control of that courtroom. He was performing for the cameras. Okay. And I mean, three-ring circus. The defense expert, these are officers of the court. They had to know in their heart of hearts that OJ was Simpson. Instead, they turned it into a race war because they wanted to beat the system. And so they got the acquittal. And the prosecution, they're complete assholes. They put a Black Panther on the jury. Nobody saw this in the courtroom because there was no cameras. But when the announcement came in, Black Panther raised his fist, okay, in a salute to O.J. Simpson. The female who saw O.J. Simpson racing from the scene wasn't allowed to testify because she went on hard copy and got $5,000 to appear on hard copy. They thought she would be a bad witness. No, she places him at the scene, racing away. She took his plate number down. Unbelievable.
And then what happened to the evidence at his house? Because you said that earlier you said there was a trail of blood from Nicole Simpson's house to his house, and then there was blood all over his house.
Yeah.
What happens to that evidence? Like when the cops jump over in the emergency situation, like what happens to the evidence in the house? Obviously, he has the cuts on his hand.
Yeah. Let me just give you. This was an exquisite forensic case. The two bloody gloves. The left-hand glove was found at Bundy Drive. The right-hand glove was found at O.J. Simpson's house. The right-hand glove had hair strands from the victims. Okay. The bloody socks in his bedroom had blood from Nicole and Ron Goldman from the crime scene. Transfer and exchange. O.J.'s blood in his house indicated he had suffered a wound before he went to Chicago. You had passive drops of blood. Okay. The blood inside the Bronco was matched by DNA to the blood of the victims because he drove in the Bronco when he was loaded with blood. He had a change. The ski cap found near Ron Goldman's body had fibers matching Simpson's Bronco. Judge Ito refused to allow that into evidence. The ski cap found at the crime scene had 12 hairs which matched O.J. Simpson. Goldman's shirt had head hair which matched O.J. Simpson. The bloody shoe prints found at the crime scene came from a size 12 Bruno Magli shoes, very expensive shoes. Only 12 were sold in the United States. Dr. Henry Lee said, no, that didn't match. The FBI expert who has a book on my series, because they have 65 titles, wrote a book on footwear impression, identified that as the Bruno Magli shoe. The prosecution did not cover Simpson's apparent suicide note, an original statement to the police. A jailhouse guard overheard Simpson confess to Roosevelt Greer that he did it. Judge Ito wouldn't allow it in, and he ruled it hearsay. We have a bucket of evidence here that's unbelievable. So there was a trail of evidence from Bundy Drive to Rockingham linked by the Bronco that made him the suspect. And the proof of the pudding is when they had the civil trial 2 years later, he was found guilty because all the evidence that Judge Ito wouldn't allow in was allowed in. And here's the kicker. There's one thing worse. During the crime scene process, there was a patent print of blood on the rear gate at Bundy Drive. Mark Furman didn't tell anybody. He made a note in his book. Why didn't he tell anybody? Because he was afraid he was not going to get the case. Now the other guys were going to take it over. By the time they went back, it was gone. One thing worse, during the crime scene process, if you look at the bodies, clearly you can see drops of blood falling on Nicole Brown Simpson's back. That blood is from OJ. They missed it. When the body went to the morgue, it was washed down. And why is that? Because there's no communication between the district attorney's office and the medical examiner's office because they're in competition for these big cases when these movie stars do stupid shit to themselves. All right? All that evidence was lost.
So the defense that they went after politics, Chief Patrick Jordan here, he was a retired chief at LA County Sheriff's Department. He says the prosecution worried more about politics than prosecuting. Tragic. So obviously from what I'm hearing, you believe OJ absolutely 100% is guilty. He murdered both of them. I mean, from everything you presented, that's what I'm getting,
Absolutely. But here's the kicker. Shapiro, being kind of a stupid attorney, he's an entertainment attorney. He had OJ take a lie detector test because OJ says, I could pass a lie detector test. He got a -22. That means before he was born, he was lying. Okay. And it was all politics all the way around. There's no doubt about it. But if you really, I'm really vested in this because I put too much time into this thing. But let me tell you something. Here's something interesting. In 2006, Judith Reagan from HarperCollins signed a contract with OJ to write a book called If I Did It. Okay? He was paid $3.5 million. There was such a public outcry that she was fired and she left HarperCollins. But what she did, she performed one of the greatest journalistic acts in history. She had OJ make a videotape to promote the book. In the book, right, he talks about his imaginary friend, okay, right, and a knife, and basically is confessing to the murder of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman. Now, what happened is she was fired. The book came out. If I did it, wasn't sold because there was litigation by the Goldman family. What happened is Fred Goldman, the father of Ron Goldman, okay, got the rights to the book, okay, and then what happened? He found out about the tapes, okay. So the tapes, okay, remained dormant for years. On March 11, 2018, Fox News released the tapes, O.J. Simpson's confession. What a fantastic culmination to a very, upsetting case. There was nothing about race here. This is all about politics and gamemanship.
But they used it to they used race to pervert the justice system, and that's basically what they've been doing. The media and politicians have been doing for ever since that time. We see today that prosecutions are race based, criminal trials are race based, sentences are race based, investigations are race based. It's honestly it's a Marxist divide and conquer strategy, and I didn't realize it started with I didn't realize how much race played. I was young at that time, so I didn't realize how much race played into that, and how the prior riots had happened. The Rodney King riots had played into that trial.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And let's face it. The news media, once again, the news media in this country is the biggest problem. The news media turned this into an international soap opera. Every day, people tuned in to watch the O.J. Simpson soap opera. It was not about the victims anymore. It was about race and about politics and who could win.
Yeah,
I
was always under I didn't know Ron Goldman was just a waiter. I thought that was her boyfriend, because of what I saw in the news. I thought that it was her boyfriend, and in a fit of rage. That's why he was murdered, but no, he was just returning. The poor guy was just returning glasses to her.
I would say he would probably like to have been a boyfriend, and that's why he was returning the glasses. But he walked into a terrible situation.
Wow.
But Fred Goldman I got a kick out of Fred Goldman. He got the rights to the book. If I did it, he wrote the foreword. He did it. And so he basically set the record straight. Doesn't bring his family back, but it was a good thing. And Judith Reagan, she got beat up for that, but if it wasn't for her, we wouldn't have had these O.J. Simpson tapes. Because he was such an egomaniac. You watch him on the tape, he's talking about himself.
So, what do you think about the media spectacle of it? What do you if you had to sum up the whole O.J. Simpson case, what do you think? You're saying obviously the L.A. cops made grave mistakes on the crime scene. The judge weighed in on the case heavily, and then they had a brilliant defense to get a murderer off. How would you sum the whole thing up to prevent something like that from happening again?
Well, first of all, I'm big on crime scenes and forensics. Okay, forensics will make or break you. There's not much you can do about the race card being played, because that seems to be the flavor of the day. Excuse me. But as long as they missed that blood drops on Nicole Brown Simpson's back. That was a lock. How did O.J. Simpson's blood get on her back? That's a lock. The patent print and blood. If they had collected that patent print and blood on the rear gate, there's no case. But soon as those tapes were released to a jury that was already latently racist and ignorant to start off with, so they played on the ignorance and the latent racism of that jury to get that acquittal. But once again, I blame Gil Garcetti. Why would you move the case from Brentwood? You get a better jury pool. How do I sum it up? I sum it up as a big soap opera that justice did not prevail, and everybody was playing the game. The prosecution, they were playing. The defense, they were playing. And the judge, a complete incompetent, an egomaniac, lost all control of the courtroom.
Yeah, that's a wild story, man. That's like to hear it. I always thought that he was guilty, but I like there was a lot of facts in there that I had wrong, and the media had portrayed this a little differently.
Once that became racial, the lines were drawn. You know what I did at the conclusion of that case? I did the third edition of my textbook and laid out how O.J. Simpson did it. Okay, so
Really?
I'm a real murder cop. Okay, these are the errors. Here's how he did it. I laid it out. So it's
But even
it's horrible.
you said that like even with the blood, like the blood drops are OJ's blood on Nicole Simpson's back is a lock, but I don't know, because how do you explain that? How do you explain the jury overlooking the blood on his sock? That was from both of them. Like they overlooked that. That to me, that's a lock. You have blood of both of them on his sock in his residence.
I think the blood on her back from O.J. Simpson is a hell of a lot more important than the blood on the socks. Okay, in the realm of forensics.
How could you possibly get the blood from either of them on your sock in that same time period? I mean, like what, we want to talk about statistics. It's impossible. How do you even know Ron Gold,
It's statistically impossible, but I guarantee you, we talked about this earlier on something else. If you had a videotape of O.J. Simpson committing his murder, that jury was going to acquit him. That's called jury nullification. All right? No way were they going to get a conviction. But when the evidence was presented in a civil court with a different body of people, there was no doubt.
Yeah.
It's very upsetting. It's more upsetting for the families because, let's face it, the victims became meaningless in the media coverage of the event. It was all about OJ.
Well, yeah, and Hood Maya says it here. He says, "Who doesn't play on people's ignorance, there?" And we talk about it a lot. We talk about low information in the media because low information in the public when it comes to political process, when it comes to the way crime scenes work, when it comes to everything, and we watch how everything we watch in the media is like basically there's a narrative spin on it. Like Eric Adams, the poster child for sanctuary cities, the person who spent 20 times the amount of all sanctuary cities combined, somehow was targeted. It's public. It is in the public and throughout the media that Eric Adams was targeted by Joe Biden's Justice Department. The same guy that he said he was the Biden of Brooklyn, self-proclaimed Joe's favorite mayor. And we watched that. So, yeah, you're right. You're right, Hood Mayor. Who doesn't play on people's ignorance?
It's interesting. You just brought up something. I was on the local news media in New York during this case. And I was on a panel. And guess who else was on the panel? Eric Adams, as a detective sergeant from Transit, arguing in favor of OJ and how the evidence was planted. And I'm telling them, something, you're tied up with your ethnicity. You're too vested in your blackness. This is called forensics.
What was that on? What channel? I got to find that one.
It was that lady. It was a girl. She had a program. I forget her name. It's so many years ago. But she had a program that she would do current events. And
okay. But you were on a panel on TV with him, and I watched a lot of your panels. The last couple of days, I've been watching a lot of them. So I watched a lot of like some of the stuff, but some of the stuff's lost. Like it's just you can't get all of it. But that's interesting. Yeah. He was arguing that the evidence was planted. And this is coming from a guy who affected less than 10 arrests as a member of the NYPD. So, how he would know how a crime scene works is beyond me.
So you can't make this stuff up, John. I'm telling you. That's why I spent my entire life dedicated to making more of a profession of homicide investigation. Okay. And so the only reason I did that Godfather book was to leave a legacy for my grandkids and for others to say, well, listen, this was my contribution to society, because we're not going to be around forever. But it's nice to be true to yourself and to stand up for what's right. And you get beat up along the way a little bit, but you have to love the way I exited the NYPD. It was like a fairy tale exit. I escaped.
Yeah. So for those of you watching it or listening, I have all the links to Vernon's books, his latest book, and a couple of the other books that he did, the other books he did in the description. Vern, anything else you want to highlight that while you're here? We went over the OJ case. We went over the first DNA case in New York State, the third in the world, right? The second in the country. And anything else? Any other highlights? Like, you had a pretty crazy career. You know, that we spoke on the Larry Davis one on the first episode we did with you. But anything you like to bring out today or discuss?
No, we've gone for the most part of an hour, so there's no sense starting a new case. All I can say is God bless law enforcement and God bless what they got to put up with. Because I'll tell you right now, I wouldn't put up with over New York Minute. Okay, fire me, but I'm going to make sure justice is done. All right, and I'm not taking any shit. All right, because we're not paid for that. All right, we dedicate our lives to the protection of society and for people. We shouldn't be abused. And we are being abused, and the politicians are responsible for it.
No, 100%. Vernon, we talked a little bit about it, just so for the audience to hear it. Like, what are your thoughts about all of these social media influencers that are going around sticking cameras in cops' faces and abusing them, asking for business cards, and just like literally belittling cops? And we see it daily. We see the videos come out daily. Just what's your thoughts on that?
You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of abused women who are afraid to speak out because the people who are in charge allow that to happen. I guarantee you, if somebody got in the face of one of these politicians and did that shit, they wouldn't last 2 minutes. There'd be a new law passed. All right? But we're the whipping people. We're the whipping people of society. Okay? And we're the bad guys, but we're the good guys. And that's why I keep pushing. That's why I keep saying, hey, listen, we're the people that we work for God. Okay, that's our job, all right, to do the right thing. And so that's all I can say about it. I wouldn't tolerate it.
Totally agree with you. Yeah, it's a shame. So we've been actually trying to highlight that here and saying that, like, the leadership of the NYPD as well as the police union should be stepping up and actually putting policy in place. The law's there. I mean, it's not going to get prosecuted. We understand that, but like, it should be the rule of law inside of the NYPD through NYPD training. We're basically leaving these cops out there to and they don't know how to act off duty either. You know, like we saw the recent assault and robbery of an off duty cop who was armed with his firearm, wearing a gun belt, and I believe his response to the reaction of two males approaching him, one with a pipe in his hand, the other with a knife in his hand, as their mask. I believe he didn't know how to act because it's not in the training. We've lost the presence. We've talked about that over and over again. And it's a learned behavior, is to like not do anything, like be reactionary instead of proactive, you know.
Yeah. I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, first of all, nobody gets into your personal space, but more importantly, situational awareness. We talked about that. You have to be aware of the situation that you're in. And I see people getting right up into the face of police officers. You're too damn close. I'm sorry. I'm in fear of my life. I'm taking action.
Yeah, no, totally agree with you. So yeah, we went a little over an hour. I appreciate you joining us. Anything else you got before we get out of here?
No, I can thank you for the opportunity. I love being on the podcast with you. It's great. We share a little lieutenancy with each other.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll have you back when Eric gets back. You know, maybe we'll go into some other. Maybe we could deep dive into some other stuff. And you know, it's always a pleasure. It's an honor to have you here. And you know, it's great to hear these stories in depth. I mean, and you've done a great work in the NYPD, and then even after the NYPD, you really cemented a legacy. And so we're always honored to have you. So anytime you could join us, you know, we appreciate you.
All right, take care. 10-4.
All right, Vernon. All right, ladies and gentlemen, the great Vernon Geberth. All right, make sure you check him out. Go buy his book. And any questions, send us. We could forward it. We could forward it over to him if you have it. And like I said, we'd love to have you guys back on in the past. So Vernon, we'll be back. Guys, check out the Sal Greco show at 13:05 or 1:05 p.m. today at the Finest Unfiltered on YouTube or on X. He's going to have a former NYPD cop on who's going to go through his career. So looking forward to that as well. So talk to you guys soon. Finest Unfiltered. We'll be back at you.
There's a handful of retired officers that don't live in the state that have a lot to say about the dream team, as I like to call it. All of a sudden, they retire and have a master plan on how to fight crime, but nothing to contribute when they were here. They want to come back and be part of the dream team. What can I say?
Law enforcement professionals dedicate their lives to serving and protecting our community. But who's protecting their financial futures? That's where Laidlaw Blue comes in. Our wealth management platform is specifically designed for the law enforcement community. Laidlaw Blue is a division within Laidlaw Wealth Management, run by retired New York City detective John McDermott. His status as a retired detective uniquely positions him to establish a deep connection between Laidlaw Blue and the law enforcement community. Our platform is easy to use and provides a range of financial services, including investment management, retirement planning, and insurance solutions. With Laidlaw Blue, you can secure your financial future and provide for your loved ones. Our team of experienced financial advisors understands the unique challenges and opportunities that law enforcement professionals face. We're here to help you navigate the complexities of financial planning and achieve your goals. Laidlaw Blue. Secure your financial future today. Book a meeting using the QR code displayed or call us directly on 888-901-BLUE. That's 888-901-BLUE.